Hi guys, my name is Mayana. Welcome to MyoCore. This is my iPhone that I use as a microphone and my teddy bear case. His name is Steve. Say hello to him as well. So today I wanted to do a video. I wouldn't necessarily say this is a video essay. Excuse me, Miss Girl. I wouldn't say this is a video essay. I would say this is just like a rant or a discussion, but it's basically that time of year again where people start to basically talk shit about people who read a lot of books during the year. So I seen a tweet on Twitter the other day, and it was from someone who was like, how do you read 250? It was them quoting. It was like, how do you read 250 books a year? Do you even have a job? And I thought this was so crazy because I have been on Goodreads since 2015. I mean, as we all know, I've been reading my entire life. I've been on Goodreads since 2015, and I started tracking my reading goals in 2017. Also, I love the fact that my reading goals track all the way back to 2017. Like, I love that. I'm sorry, but that's the reason why I won't get rid of Goodreads, because even though other apps can, like, move your books over, they cannot move your reading stats over. And until I can find something that does that, I'm sorry, but I will be staying my ass on that shitty ass website because I have so many years of data on there. But basically, I read a lot, okay? And I've read more and more over time. But whenever you read a lot of books, people are always like, do you have a job? Do you even go to school? Like, do you even do anything? I even saw this tweet last night, which hopefully I can find it so I can put a screenshot up for you guys, but I don't know if I will be, because it was like a tweet that I saw in passing and I didn't really like interact with it. I read a few tweets, but I didn't like save it because I didn't think I was going to be making this video. So I randomly thought about it last night. But basically, the tweet was saying, like, how do you read more than, like, 50 books a year? Like, do you even have a job? And then under the post, somebody was like, yeah, like, you can tell these peoples aren't, like, doctor, lawyers, or et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, first of all, girl, are you? Like, yeah, of course we aren't. Like, yeah. I don't want to be a doctor or a lawyer. I've never wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer. Like, what? I'm in school for marketing, girl. What? And I just think it's so crazy that this video obviously isn't scripted. I don't know if you can tell that, like, this is literally just me talking. So if my points, like, if it seem jumbled or don't seem concise or whatever, that's why. But book community is so interesting to me because I feel like the book community is not treated like any other community. Like, only in the book community do you get ridiculed for reading a lot. Like, if you read like more than like 200 books, you are shat on. People are like, do you have a job? Do you go to work? Honestly, I've read the most when I had a job. Like, when I read 300 books, this is my first year that I fully haven't had a job, and the only reason is because I'm in school now. But even where I've had periods of being unemployed, this is the first year since I started working that, like, I've been fully unemployed, but I've been in school, so full time, so that's why. But even then, like, it's just so crazy because when I started working at Target, that's when I started reading the most, especially because I would learn how to, like, put my AirPods in, and I would have, like, a wig on, or I would have my hair, like, down or something, and I would have my AirPods, like, covering my ears. I would also work so many hours, and I would just be alone, because you're just, like, when you work at Target, like, I worked in the style section, and I worked at Target for almost 4 years, by the way. That's why I talk about it a lot, because it was, like, my longest job that I've had so far. But when I worked at Target, like, you weren't really allowed to, like, really work with other people because you're folding clothes, handling the fitting room. So the fitting room was, like, the most time you would talk to people. And then, like, Target is such a big store that, like, people don't really come up to you to say much. And then if I, like, had a register shift, because they would give you a register shift every blue moon. Like, when you first start working there, they'll give you it for, like, a week. And then after that, because you need to learn how to do the register no matter where you work in Target, because there'll be some times when they don't have enough people called up there, so they send other people from other areas in the store up there during the day, so you need to know how to use the register. And so even when I worked there, when I had, like, register shifts, sometimes I wouldn't be seeing people for so long. I would just have my AirPods in and I would just be doing stuff. Like, I don't know. People already don't see, like, listening to audio. If you're one of those people who don't see listening to audiobooks as reading, first of all, get the fuck out of here because you're ableist. I'm not even going to touch on how ableist that is because I feel like we've had a conversation about that. But I think that people don't view audiobooks as reading because you aren't doing it, not only because you're not doing it with your eyes, which reading isn't about what you do with your eyes, but how you get the information in. And so for people to be like, oh, well, reading is something that you do with your eyes, not really. And also, what about people who are blind? There are a lot of people who love to read from different facets in life, and imagine you are blind or not able to read. So just because you listen to audiobooks, you don't read? Like, that's so unfair. You're still comprehending. Like, I still left this book with the same information that you did. So I don't understand why people are like, oh, well, audiobooks aren't reading. You want to know why? Because it makes it easier for people. Whenever in the book community something is easier for you, it automatically is shat on because other people just don't have time to do it, or maybe they don't want to listen to audiobooks, or they don't like audiobooks, or whatever, or they feel like it's too easy for them because, I don't know, they think that things have to be hard. But it's just like, audiobooks are a form of reading. And even like when I made a video last year when I worked at Ulta, and it was about me and how much I read throughout the day at working and shift at Ulta. And so in the video, I literally am reading 3 forms of media all day. Okay. So I get there, I Uber there, I'm reading the book on my Kindle, right? So then I get to work, I'm listening to the audiobook. I go to lunch, I'm reading it on my Kindle. I go back to work, I'm listening to audiobook. I get in the Uber, I'm reading it on my Kindle. I go home, I finish the book physically, right? But you know what people only commented on? The fact that I was listening to an audiobook. And they were like, oh, well, audiobooks aren't real reading. Probably read more of the book with my eyes than I did listening to it. But because it made it easier for me, people didn't like that. And it's just so interesting to me because it's easier for you. People already they just don't agree with it. And I feel like reading is the only hobby where, like, no matter how much you read, you are shat on for it. Like, whenever you read, you know, I read 250 books this year. And when I say that, people are like, oh, do you have a job? Do you go to school? And it's like, yeah, I do. I do go to school, actually. And even when I did have a job, I still read a lot. And I go to school and I make time for reading because reading has always been my main hobby my entire life. So I'm always going to find time to do it. Especially because if I don't, I feel guilty. Because reading has been my main hobby my entire life, because I don't put time in to read, I'm going to feel guilty. So I personally put reading above all of my other hobbies because she's always been my main girl, you know? Like, she's always been there for me. She's always, like, I've always been a reader. Like, when you're in the film community, if you were to watch 100 movies within the first fucking 3 months of the year, nobody's gonna sit here. Well, I mean, sometimes people are like, girl, do you have time? But it's so normal and it's so easy to watch a movie because movies are only like 2 hours. You can watch a lot of movies in a day. You could probably watch 3 movies. Like, we'll watch 3 movies at night, and that could run from like 6 hours, right? So the time I can watch 3 movies, I could read 1 book. But it's so crazy because if I were to watch 3 movies in one night and be like, hey guys, here are all the movies I read, people would love those reviews. But if I were to read 30 books in 30 days, suddenly it's like, oh my gosh, do you even have time? Do you even have a life? Despite how much time it takes to read. Also, people have different reading speeds. Like, in the post that I read where the person was like, how are you reading 50 books a year? Like, do you even have a job? In that post, the person was like, oh, it takes me, you know, a day to read a book. It takes me about 5 hours to read a book. Personally, for me, I have insomnia. So that's usually how I get all my work done. Like, I do all of my work during the day, and then at night around like 12 o'clock is usually when I'm starting the book, and then I'm up from I'm up until like 5 a.m. So like from 12 to 5, I'm like reading a book, right? And it's just so crazy. And that's like 1 book, especially if you read on your Kindle or that book is good as fuck, like, bitch, you're gonna get through that fucking book fast as hell. You're gonna be reading through the speed of light if that book is good, right? And it's just so crazy because when I watched Doctor Who last November, I watched 13 seasons of Doctor Who in like 11 days. And everybody was like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. This is so interesting. How are you liking the show? Nobody gave a fuck that I watched 13 seasons. And I mean, the seasons are only like 13 episodes, right? So nobody gave a fuck. When I watched Game of Thrones, when I watched the entire 7 seasons of Game of Thrones in 1 week, plus I watched House of the Dragon twice, all in the same week, nobody gave a fuck. Everybody was like, oh my gosh, that's so crazy. How are you enjoying the show? But when I read 30 books a month, suddenly it's, oh my gosh, do you have a job? Do you have anything to do? It's just so crazy because people can come home, they can sit down, they can binge watch a TV show.
Are you working? Like, what else do you do in your day? Or are you just reading? This creator is specifically asking, do people who read 100 plus books have jobs or anything else that they do in their time to manage to read that much? I'm Elena, I'm a full-time worker and I read about 200 books every year, and using math, I can actually break this down pretty easily for you. The average American's reading speed is about 60 pages per hour or 1 page per minute. Now, while the average length of a book is between 200 and 400 pages, you specifically ask about like whomping books or big ones, so let's use 500-page books for an example. Using the average reading speed, it would take 8.33 hours in order to finish a 500-page book. This is not counting if you read faster or slower than the average American. Now multiply that by 100 books, and that would be 833.33 hours per year to read 100 500-page books. Divide that by 12 months, you have just over 69 hours. And while that might seem like a lot of time, do you know that the average American spends double that watching television every year? So that's how I'm able to read that much.
And nobody says anything. But if I were to come home, pick up a book, people are like, how do you read? Because I make time to read. And I'm not saying that just because you don't read. I feel like also people have an issue because they feel like it makes them question how much they love reading. Like if you don't read as much, you feel like, oh, well, maybe I don't love reading as much as this person, or maybe reading isn't really my hobby. And I also think it's equated because reading is equated with smartness. And so because all my life people are like, oh, you're so smart, and I obviously I am smart, but girl, I'd be like sitting here like people are like, oh my gosh, you're so smart, and I'd be like, girl, I'm reading a romance book. Like if you read fiction, you are not seen as like a serious reader. So I'm like, girl, I just read fiction, like I just read romance, or like it's not anything too complex or whatever. But I think that people, because they view reading as like, oh, you're so smart, that if you don't have time to read as much as another person, or if you don't read 250 books, you're not as smart as like someone who does, which I don't think that's true. I think that I just have more time to read, and I know I have a problem with doom scrolling. I mean, if you've watched my vlogs, then you know that I have a problem with doom scrolling. So what do? I implement, sorry, my eye is hurting. Because I have a problem with doom scrolling, I implement a rule where my phone apps lock. I downloaded the app and my phone apps lock from a specific time that I pick. So I pick from 6 to 11 because I like to read at night. It just sets the vibe, and it just makes sense to me, right? And so from then on, even though I still read, I also read no matter what, 50 pages before bed, like no matter what. So that's like an hour of reading before bed. And I mean, I won't say no matter what, because there are times when like I'm not doing that shit, but for the most part every night, unless I'm like in a reading slump or whatever, right? And like I just set time to read. Like I know that I have this problem, so when I'm sitting here and I'm like, bruh, I've been doom scrolling. And then sometimes with doom scrolling, sometimes I'm bored as fuck. Like sometimes I'll be like, TikTok is boring. All TikTok is at live, at TikTok shop, live, at random video with 6 likes. Like it's don't be shit on there. So I'll be like, okay, I'm bored. Like, why am I sitting here doom scrolling? I'm gonna read. Or I'll be on Twitter and I'll be like, bruh, this is boring as fuck. Why am I here doom scrolling? I'm gonna read. Like sometimes I do catch myself, and sometimes you don't. And sometimes I do give myself a break. Like I'm not saying I sit here and I read every single day no matter what. There are times where I'm like, bruh, I just don't feel like reading today. Like the book I'm reading is not that good. Like I'm just gonna take a break. Or the book I'm reading is draining me. Like I'm just gonna take a break. Yeah. But it's just so crazy because I feel like in the book community is like the only community where you're shunned for like reading a lot. And I know you're probably like, oh my gosh, poor me, poor girl who reads a lot. But it happens all the time, like especially towards the end of the year. Like once people start reaching their reading goals and start posting their reading goals, you are going to see so many videos of people being like, how are you able to read so much? And don't even get me started. People think that when you read so much, like you either are skimming, or you don't have a life, or you don't have anything to do. And even when I was in my party girl era in 2022, I was still reading a lot. It was so crazy because I was looking at that era. I stopped reading for a minute, and then I switched over to like only reading spiritual books, and I would only read like 2 of them because I was like during my like spiritual era. We're not gonna touch too much on that, right? Even during when I was going out and partying with my friends and all this stuff, I was not reading that much, and I still managed to read that was one of my most read years. I think I read 229 books that year. I still managed to read a shit ton of books during my party girl era because you know why? I would sit there and I would be like, reading is not just a hobby that I picked up yesterday. I've not been like, reading has been my entire life. Like reading is not something like I have hobbies that come and they go. I used to draw when I was in high school. I don't do that shit now. That's a hobby that didn't stick with me. Reading has been with me from when I was 7 to now. That is a hobby that I am loyal to. So I would feel guilty and I'd be like, damn, I'm not reading. Like, and I would put time aside, like, okay, I need to read, because reading is something that's always going to be with me. Especially because I've never had an era where, like, you know, where people stopped reading in like high school and stuff like that. That was the time that I started reading the most. Even get me started on like people who think that you're faking it, or they're just like, how? I also think that if you think of reading as a competition, you're not gonna read that much. Like, personally for me, I think what helps me is I'm not a very competitive person. I love bowling. I always come in last when I bowl. There's not a time when I have came in something other than last in bowling. I tell people, my friends, that all the time when we go bowling, y'all, I'm about to come in last. I don't give a fuck. I come here for the nachos and the drinks and to talk and have fun. I'm not a competitive person. Like, me and my sister, we didn't really play competitive. Well, we did. We would play like Mario Kart and stuff, but we would just play it because it was fun. Like, I'm not a competitive person at all. I'm also a quitter. I think that's also what it is. The moment I feel like I am not into something, the moment I'm like, I'm not having fun with this anymore, and not even in the sense of like, if I'm not winning, I'll quit. Like, I'm a quitter, and I think that's also a reason why I'm not competitive. I'm just not a competitive person. Okay, I'm not a competitive. If I like a guy and another girl like a guy, I'm not competitive, girl. You can have them. Like, I don't want them that bad. I get bored easily. I give up easily. Like, I'm just not. I don't know. I'm not a competitive person. So I think that's what helps me a lot. I don't give a fuck if I read 300 books and you read 350 books. Okay, I hope you enjoyed all 350. That's not me though. I don't know. Like, what am I gonna, I mean, if I wanted to. So it's like, I think that's also what helps me, is I don't see reading as like a competition. And I talked about this in one of my previous other videos, where it's like, people in the book community, they feel like they have to do things to get people to watch them and stuff like that. And even though I read a lot, people, that doesn't bring people to my page. That, like, when I would be like, oh, I read 36 books in April, I would get views, yes, but I wasn't getting more views. I don't get more views because I read a lot. I feel like all the new people who watch my channel now probably don't even know how much I usually read, because I've been in like a reading slump this year, and I've been reading like 10 to 16 books. I don't know what that's about. But I feel like people who are watching, who are new to my channel, don't even know like how I get down for real. Because I don't know, like, it's just like something that I do. I'm always reading. That, like, reading is the only hobby where like people people judge heavily for like being able to read. Like, that's just so crazy to me, because if I were to watch like Star Wars all in 1 month, which I did, nobody cares. But when I read 40 Star Wars books the same month, people were like, girl, what the hell? And it's just so crazy to me. Like, reading is like one of the only hobbies where you are judged for how much you consume. And I truly believe it is because other people just don't. And sometimes you just don't have time to, and that's okay. You just have to deal with that. Sometimes you just don't have time to. Like, sometimes when I'm like, if I have a day where I'm doing homework and I'm editing a YouTube video and I'm talking to my friends on Discord, I'm like, fuck, I really don't have time to read tonight. That's so sad. I really wish I did, but that's okay. Or when I was working at Target, and there would be times where my manager, like during Christmas seasons, my manager would be there, so I couldn't sneak my AirPods in. And I was working every single day for 2 weeks straight. I couldn't find, and I was also hanging out with my friends and stuff like that. I couldn't read every single day. I couldn't find time to read sometimes. And that's okay. That's fine. But also, find out what works for you. Sometimes you might need to only pick up a book on your lunch break. Sometimes you might need to pick up listen to an audiobook to and from your way to work. Sometimes you, like, with me, reading is about sacrifice. Like, because I love reading so much, I also love listening to music, but sometimes I have to sacrifice. Okay, I want to crochet and I also want to read, but I love listening to music. But sorry, I listen to music every day. I'm gonna have to listen to music on another day. Like, today's my time to listen to my audiobook and crochet. Like, sometimes you do have to sacrifice certain things when you really love reading, but also maybe you don't. You don't have to. And that's okay. You don't have to have read 50. Like, you don't have to have read 100 books. The average person probably reads like 1 book a month, if that. The amount of people I come across who are like, oh, I really don't read that much. Like, I probably read 1 book within the last 6 months. Like, if you read 1 book this year, congratulations. Because there are probably some people who haven't read 1 book in the past 5 years. Like you still, and it's not about who has read more. It's about the books that you've read and the time that you've spent with them and the stories that you've come across. It's really not about, and I think that sometimes is what helps me read. Because I feel like when I talk about how much I read, people, like when I'm like, okay, I want to read this book, and this book, people think of it as like, oh, I'm trying to read 15 books a month. No, all 15 of these books sound interesting and I need to read them all right now. I wish that I could read 15 books at once. Like I could literally, my eyes could scan 15 books at once. And so, but I can't. But I'm like, oh, all these stories sound good. All these tropes sound good. All this writing, I want to read it. So like sometimes I'll finish a book and I'll pick up another, or I'll be reading 2 books at once because I'm like so intrigued with the story. For me, it's not about the numbers. So even when I'm like, oh, I want to read 15 books this month, it's not, I want to read 15 books to reach a goal. I want to read these 15 books because they all sound interesting and these all stories that I want to get into. And it's so crazy because even now, after all these years of reading, like reading stories is still something that I get excited about. It's still something that I'm like, oh, I really want to get into this book. Or really, this is so good and this is so interesting. And that's what reading should be. It should not be, oh, well, you read 250 books and I can't. So you obviously don't have a life because I can't read 250 books because I have to work and I have to go to school. Okay, and so do other people. And even if they don't, so what? Even in a time when I wasn't going to school and I wasn't working, honestly, I wasn't really reading as much as I used to do, but still, I was still reading a lot. And so what if I don't have a life? So what if I don't have any responsibilities and I can read as much as this? Okay? So what? Like, why are you making someone feel guilty and feel bad about themselves? Feel bad, like telling them that they don't have a life or they don't do anything with their life. They don't have it. And that's all. In this economy, how hard it is to have a job in this economy? Girl, please. Please be serious. And you want to sit here and judge people because they don't have a job. So what they do is they sit there and read. Like, it's just so sick. And I just hate how people are able to get away with it. Okay, so I'm literally editing this video in the middle of the night and I came across this tweet of the same tweet that I was talking about earlier, the one that was talking about how this girl read 200 books, and somebody quoted it and was like, not to be a hater, but I want to see her Goodreads. I would bet money that this is entirely dark romance. Maybe a little Sally Rooney and other book talk books, probably nothing older than 20 years here, no offense. And we're not even going to touch on how misogynistic that is, but that's another point that I forgot to bring up in this video, is that when you are a woman and you read a bunch of books, people automatically are like, oh, she read a bunch of romance books, or she read a bunch of thrillers. Like, nobody could possibly believe that you sat here and read what they deem as like quality books or classics. And it's like, when you're a woman, even if I did read quality books, because I don't read classics all the time, even though I do read them, because I don't read them all the time, people are going to look at me and they're going to go, oh, well, you don't read classics, or you don't read this, or you don't read that. Like, my past 10 books are romance books, so somebody could go through my Goodreads and be like, oh, well, your past 10 books are romances, so clearly that's all you read. But it's like, the fact that I read 2 1,000-page books in November, 2 different books, by the way, different authors, that totally negates the fact that the romances that I read totally negates the fact that I read 200 books. Like, and it's like, I shouldn't even have to justify myself. I shouldn't have to be like, oh, well, I read a lot of sci-fi. Like, sci-fi fantasy is my main genre that I read. I pick up romances as palate cleansers, or sometimes they're cute, or sometimes they're easy to read, or sometimes I want to read 30 romance books in a month, but that doesn't mean that's all that I read. And even if it was all that I read, what are you reading? What are you reading right now? How about that? Because it is possible to read big books and still read a lot, but it's also possible to read romances and still read a lot. But what are you reading? How about that? Another thing that I see people say when someone reads a lot is the point of reading is to retain information. And when you are reading 30 books a month, you just cannot retain that information. And so therefore, I just don't think that like you guys are like really understanding the point of reading.
This one goes out to people who read a lot of books, people who read a lot of books. You're reading like 30 books a month. I don't trust it. I don't. I'm sorry. Like, you're going too fast. I just feel like your retention isn't matching your consumption, and it's just not. I just don't buy it. I feel like I could trust a person reading 2 books a month, or should I say 2 books in a year, actually, over and over again. I can trust them to use the information from those books a lot more effectively than a person who reads 30 books a month. I take crazy. I know what the rebuttal is. How many do you read? Listen, it's not personal. I'm just saying I don't trust people who go around saying how many books they read a month just for the sake of saying it. I just feel like it's very different. It's like, like it's different. Like, not on some Cat Williams, but I'm just saying, is a person who reads a manual over and over again is bound to be a lot more effective than a person who reads close to 20, 30 manuals in a month. Eventually, the manuals just become passive. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think a person who reads 2 books to 3 books a month or even in a year is a lot more useful to society than a person who's knocking out 20 books. That person's just a book club fanatic. I'm just saying.
And it's like, but you don't know that. You don't know me. Like I said, I have been reading like 200 to 300 books a year for the past 4 years. I have been reading over 100 books for the past like 6 years. Like, I have been reading a lot for a very long time. I can still tell you the information of books that I have read 5 years ago. I can tell you the information of books that I read when I was in middle school. I can tell you what happened in like a Wattpad book and I won't even know the name. Like, I could be like, I don't know if you guys remember, but there's this Wattpad book that did this, and this. I don't remember the name. Like, I remember books that I've read yesterday. For me personally, when I read 30 books a month, the books that I usually don't remember are the books that I don't care about, because I'm such a critical reader. Not every book I read I love. So for me personally, and that's just more so of like, I just don't care anymore. It's like one ear out the other if I didn't like it. But if I love the book, I will remember every single detail about the book. And it's like, also, so what? Like, so that's like, I hate that people do this thing to cope with how much they do or don't read. And they just sit here and they go, oh, well, I only read 5 books a month, but I'm better than you because I remember every single thing that I read. Okay, I read 30 books this month and I remember everything that I read. So now what? Now I've read more than you, and I remember everything. So now what? And it's just like, it's just so crazy to me that like people, and it's like, people have been reading, this is not something new. People have been reading 30 books a month forever. There are people who have stay-at-home moms who will read like a thriller book, and they'll read like a thriller book a day. It's like, I have this like view of like my life in the future, like once I'm married and I settle down and I have kids, and I feel like I'm gonna be that mom. Like, and in this universe, in my universe, I don't use social media. Like, I beat my social media addiction, and I just use my phone like maybe at night a little bit to scroll, like, and like I'll be like in bed with my husband, and I'll just like put my glasses on and I'll just like scroll through social media, and then like I'll like put my glasses up and I'll like have my book and I'll be reading in bed. Like, in that life, like I'm reading, and like I'm like a housewife or whatever, and I'm like, taking care of the family and stuff, and I'll like bake, and being a housewife is something I dream about often, if we couldn't tell. And I'll like have like my book of the day, and I'll like just be reading it throughout the day while I'm taking care of the house. And then once I'm done, I'll just sit down and I'll kick my feet up and I'll read. And there are moms who do that. Like, okay, like my mom is the reason why I read. My mom, I used to hear her on the phone with her best friend, and she would be talking about like this urban romance book that she was reading, and she would just talk about like the crazy stuff that was happening, and she would bond with my step grandma about it, and they would be talking about this crazy book with these plots. And like her and her best friend were buddy reading or having a book club before buddy reading was even a term. Okay, like they would talk about, we would go to the library, and my mom would pick out this book that they were about to read together, and like I would get my little book that I would have, and like I would just listen to my mom in the car on our way home from school, like just talking about the book and like all this crazy stuff that happened. And I love that. My mom was a single mom of 2 kids and still found a way to read all the time. Unfortunately, my mom does not read anymore, and I'm trying to get her back into that lifestyle. And I gotta slowly work my way into it. It's not working. She loves her job way too much, and like she feels like she's read everything she like has to read. So unfortunately, I cannot get her back. But there are people who have moms who read a book a day, and it's just normal to them. Like, this is not something that's new. This is not something that started because of social media. This is not something that started because of like book talk and people feeling competitive and wanting to read more than you. Have you ever considered, maybe I just like reading a lot? I really enjoy stories. I really enjoy storytelling. For me, it's about what happens in that story. And that's why a lot of times when I review books, I'm like, oh, this is boring, or this had like 100-page worth of boringness, because I feel like that those pages could have been used to be doing something. I'm here for the plot. I'm here for the characters, but it has to be both. Okay, I tell y'all all the time, if you watched any of my videos, I say this all the time, I'm a both person. I need plot and I need characters. I cannot just have one. If I am going to have one, it's going to be plot, but I need both, okay? Because when I say that, people are like, oh, Mayana doesn't really care about characters. No, I love good characters, but I'm not about to sit here for 350 pages and read these two characters lollygagging for 350 pages. Girl, you better make this book 100 pages and then period. Then I'll read that. Then I'll eat it up. But you got me sitting here for 350 pages and they not doing nothing but flocking in some flowers. Girl, what the hell? But I don't know how I went on that rant, but sorry. But yeah, I feel like reading is one of the, and I don't know, I can't really say for sure because I'm not really into other communities. Even though I crochet community has their issues as well, but I'm not really in the crocheting community like that. I just be like sitting there watching, like their drama is like, oh bitch, somebody stole my pattern and is passing it off as my own, or like, you know, shit like that, like crazy stuff. For the most part, like I said, I'm not really in the community, so I don't know. So like book community is like the only community that I've ingrained in. I've been ingrained in the book community for a very long time, so I can only speak about the book community. But it's so crazy because people can sit here and watch TV all day and nobody judges. And I'm not judging. I watch TV all day sometimes too. Like, the only reason I don't watch TV all day all the time is because I read so much. But people can sit here and watch TV all day and they can binge watch a show and they can watch 22 episodes in 2 days, which I also do when I am binge watching, by the way. And nobody says anything. But I read a whole series within a week and suddenly I didn't retain any information. Suddenly I don't remember what happened, or suddenly I skim read in order to read that much. No. Maybe I'll just read faster than you. I've been reading since I was, what age do you know how to read? I've been reading since I was like 7. Have you like, that's almost 2 decades. Damn. What a stroke. Yeah, I'll be 27 next year. I've been reading for almost 2 decades. Of course I would read fast. Of course I would pick up on how to read faster. But it's not about reading. It's not about learning how to read fast. Because people always ask me, Mina, how do you read so much? It's not about how fast you read. It's about making time to read. It's about being like, damn, I could be reading right now, so I will. If you have time to scroll on your phone on TikTok, you have time to pick up a book. If you have time to watch a TV show, you can pick up a book. I still don't know how to balance like watching TV shows and reading books, and I do prioritize watching TV shows over reading books. And there are some TV shows I wish I could watch and that I wish I knew how to prioritize. But for me, once it hits nighttime, once that sun goes down, it's time to read. It's not time to pick up no TV show. I think I said all I need to say. I think I've talked for a very long time. I don't think I need to talk about anything else. But definitely let me know your opinions on this. I would love to have a discussion. This is like more so of a rant. But yeah, I would love to see more people's thought on this and more people adding to the conversation. And even if you have like a different perspective, I would love that, because this wasn't a video essay. Like this is, or whatever I do, because I don't even think I do videos essays. I think I just sit there and I talk about what I want to talk about for however long I want to talk about it. But usually I'll have like a rebuttal or like what other people may think. But this video I don't, because I kind of don't care. So yeah, thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.